Hey guys, this is my current office and it's time for some change. As you can see, everything's crammed up. There's no storage space, there's no table space, and I'm ready for an upgrade, so let's do this thing. So now that I got everything out of the room, I can kind of look at the whole space and think of a design that fits me well. Once I quickly sketched out the design, I came up with a list of materials that I need to buy. The very first thing I wanted to get started on was the frame for the floating shelf. I just used 2x4s and cut them in half longwise horizontally. Pretty simple. The shelf is going to be 6 feet long and about 10 inches wide. I have already marked a level line and where the studs are located, so I can just screw them in right here. Next up is the frame for the floating table. I personally wanted this thing to be absolutely massive because I've never had a big table before. So this thing is 13 feet long and 32 inches wide. After marking out the level for the table frame, I needed some help holding it up while I attached it. Before putting this up, I had already marked where each and every stud was in the wall, and I used 3.5-inch screws to attach it to the wall. I wanted to get a feel for the table as I attach this last piece with clamps. You can always never have enough clamps. But yeah, it feels pretty good. Now ready to attach it with screws. Frame is all set, ready to move on to the next step. So a circular saw is what I have available at this time, and I'm going to switch out the blade to a ultra fine finish cutting blade. Setting the angle to 45 degrees to make the cuts for the floating shelf and table. What I did here was I clamped down a perfectly straight piece of plywood to use as a guide to push the saw in a very straight line. Ideally, a track saw is best to use, but this is what I had available at the time. Now I brought in all the cut pieces to lay it out and to check the fitment. Prior to nailing down and gluing all the pieces, you want to make sure everything is a tight, clean fit. If there are any minor discrepancies, then I would definitely take a look at that right now and make any adjustments before going on to the next step. What I found out that worked best for me was to align the pieces, use tape to hold the edges together, and then glue and nail it together, piece by piece, since I didn't have the right clamps for 45-degree cuts. But this method did the trick for me. So once the shelf and the table are all nailed and glued together, I would give it a few hours for it to dry, and then test out the structural stability of it. I don't plan on doing any gymnastics on this thing, but it does withstand my weight. Next comes the fun part, making a storage wall. Now there's this disclaimer here, I am not an expert in making cabinets, so I know I'm going to get a bunch of hate from the cabinet guys, but that's okay. The way I see it is, if it makes sense in my head, then I should be able to come up with a design and make it work in real life. Sounds convincing, right? This first section assembled was intended for the computer printer area. I forgot to mention that I was using 3/4-inch smooth sanded plywood, and that is what I used for the remainder of the storage wall area that I'm building. The remainder of the frame I tried to build in the room. I intended on having 2 columns with cabinet doors from floor to ceiling, and 2 columns with cubbies that are open. As soon as we lifted this thing up, you can begin to see the bigger picture. Adding in the final pieces of the frame was a very tight fit, and then after I nail all the borders in place, the thing is not going anywhere. I really like how each section is staggered and none of the shelves meet at the same area. The next thing that I did was I added about 1 inch of face frame everywhere. This conceals any discrepancies and makes it look much smoother. To finish off the frame, I sanded down every edge just to make it extra smooth. And ready to paint. If you have made it this far in this video, I want to congratulate you. But I need to conclude this part 1 of a 2-part video. If you find any of my content interesting or useful, feel free to like or subscribe for more. Anyway, stay tuned for part 2, which will be coming out very soon. See you guys in the next one.